shows up, we'll find out who he is then. Hi!
Hello!
Welcome to the advanced writing panel thing. Stuff. Yay words. What are words?
I like words. I put words together and go, yay, words together.
Yes. As I've said before, my name is TJ Mind. I have been published in many different things, including Heat with the Promise and Fang 9, which is out now and sold out at this con. So, that's the thing. Who are you, new person who I don't think has been behind the table yet?
I haven't had three. My name is Dennis Dayspring. I'm a writer. I've been writing seriously in the fandom since 2010. I am very tired because I've had to deal with dealer's table issues and agenting for an artist. So this is the first panel I've done, and it's like I've been doing like 5 of them already. So I will try to make words that don't sound stupid. I am. Anyway.
What do you say?
I'm good.
Cool. And we're being joined by a third person. Who are you, third person?
I don't know.
Then get off the table. No,
I
go
remember
away.
who he was. He's a guy that does like commissioning and was talking about self-publishing and awesome things like that, and he's a truck driver and fun things.
Exactly.
There you go.
I'm Mog. I'm a Moogle. I do Moogle things.
There's one up there if you don't mind your phone not being used to.
There are various things down in the dealer's den that I'm in that you should buy. Not at 2 if you like the more risque stuff. Sold out of Fang 9.
Yep.
I never even saw a copy of it yet because I haven't had a chance to look.
Yeah.
If you want to see a copy, I
we'll
believe
show you.
a person over there has one.
Dissident Signals, which is an excellent anthology. I would highly recommend you pick up.
The editor was a nice person.
The editor was a nice person.
Thank you, guys.
Oh, I thought the person was dead when you said was.
No, wait. You didn't use it in past tense about me. The editor was a nice person.
I was like,
Because at the
oh,
time,
I'm
he
so
wasn't
sorry,
an
what
editor. Now
happened?
he's
They
not an
died.
editor,
Then
he's a
there's
writer
the
again.
person's waving. I'm like, oh, they're fine.
I have not got stuck into another thing.
Probably gonna hate it because it's Starbucks.
I don't care at this point.
It's got a lot of cream in there.
Okay. I would kiss you, but I don't think that's appropriate.
I mean, you can, but you know.
But thank you so much.
Roz might get mad.
Yes.
It
Yes.
would feel incredibly uncomfortable.
He probably wanted to know where his was.
Coffee or kiss?
The coffee.
Yeah, you were making out with that coffee.
Oh, thank you so much.
And it's unsweetened, just the way you like it, because, you know, clearly taste is burning and unsweetened go together.
Yes. Look, I live in the South. I can drink unsweet tea. It's a skill.
Yes.
It is a skill.
It
Don't
is.
believe that.
I'll give you a yes.
But can you drink an unsweetened iced tea that's been passed through a Starbucks coffee machine?
That's a stretch.
Why would you want to do anything past through a Starbucks coffee machine that's not coffee?
Sometimes you don't have a choice.
Okay.
So, back to writing.
So, what topics was covered at the beginning panels, intro panels that you were on that?
Intro panels was basic how to write stories, how to goal set. It was honors lecture with words from us. Yeah, that was the big gist of it.
Intermediate covered some
Hard sci-fi.
critiques and beta trades and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Well, the third level. Do you guys have any questions to start off with?
My question is, I like how you have panels, but you don't know what's on them. It's like, what's beginning, what's intermediate, what's advanced?
Because
It's a very interesting thought on that, because sometimes something that's advanced for one person might be intermediate for another person, depending on like how skillful they are or how difficult they are. Like for somebody, like I know some writer was saying like, oh, they're so great at like combat, and like combat's just like their thing, but they have difficulty on that. So like the difficulty they have is the advanced for them, while combat for me is the more advanced topic because I have more difficulty on that.
Well, yeah, that's a good point. And you know, I will say that you know there's no one up here right now who has less than 11 publication credits, and you know that's me. I think I have the least at the moment.
How many? I have 20.
Yeah, I know you have 20.
I have over 10, I know that much.
Wow. Okay. So,
So-
yeah.
Well, the spreadsheets are glorious. Partially to know when you have your 6 months is up and you can actually do something with it again.
So actually, that is something as when you get in as writing. Once you've done a couple submissions, you're going to want to try to reach out and get more fans. And I think that's a topic we should maybe talk about. And where you go after Well, so I'm gonna do a little diatribe. If it's okay.
Go ahead.
So a lot of people, who's here writing short stories? Okay, I know short stories are great. Who's here writing novels? Before you wrote short stories, there's some hands that come down. Okay, so I'm gonna. This is gonna be a little different from. This is not gonna be useful for you guys, but a lot of people I've noticed in the Furry Writers Guild, in general, and just writers, they start with short stories even though they want to write a novel, and it's a good way to step up that process because writing a novel is a really difficult thing. And there are people out there who start writing novels, write an amazing first novel, and keep going. And if you're one of those people, I applaud you because that is a real challenge to do. Some people like the more, I'm going to write some short stories, publish them, and then try to get into writing novels. That's the approach I'm attempting to take. And so there's a lot of things I think when you're going that route, there's a couple things like you are going to have to keep track of what you submitted to, keep track of also what stories you have. It's useful to have a website. I have one. It's not the most amazing thing in the world.
It's better than nothing I have, so.
Do you have a website?
I promote all my stuff through my Sofurry, so
So,
technically not.
is this a question or a comment?
Comment.
Okay.
I wouldn't say it's useful, I'd say please make a website. They're free, do it, because you need to have somewhere to find all of your stuff.
Okay, so yeah, my mainstream pin name has a website, but my mainstream pin name has nothing published, so there's nothing on there yet.
So, a website that is not a writing topic, so to speak. If you're going to create a website, because that is technical computer and IT stuff. So if you have a friend who can help you with that, that's probably better. Some people I know in writers also do IT stuff, so it's okay to do that. It's one of those things when as you're getting farther along, you want to try to provide that social media connection or where people can find your stuff. I've tried to go with, if you want something, I put it on the website, you can find stuff there. You're obviously doing Sofurry, it's all on Sofurry. Do you write journals at all?
Like on Sofurry?
Yeah, journals are like, did you write any journals that you were, a blog post that you were coming here?
No, I was, well, I mean, it was a lot of things going on to even get here, so.
No, I understand,
Yeah, not this year.
Not this year. But that is one thing you can do, what your new stories are coming out, what you post samples. I am awful about posting samples. But that's one of the more things as you get as a writer. There's going to be a little bit of this, as you get better, there's going to be some of this overhead stuff where it's not really writing, but it's part of your writing career.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things just to keep in mind as you guys progress. You want to work on those, do a little of that. I mean, obviously social media, I like social media. Social media will piss you off. No matter who you follow, there'll be someone retweeting something that either you don't like or they're constantly tweeting their video games that you don't care about. And you can't talk about, or just whatever. There's going to be those weird things. Social media is a mixed bag, no matter who you follow or who you deal with. Everyone will at some point get burned out. And don't be afraid if you don't want to do a website. You want to do everything through Sofurry, that's fine. There's no real right answer. I do think the website's a good technique, but it's one part of yourself as a writer and your writing career.
I would also slight argue, as I know we said during the beginning writing panel, your mileage may vary on any and all things you hear from this side of the table at any panel.
Oh yeah.
Like I personally don't have a website, but it's also for me, writing is a hobby. It's a a hobby I care a lot about. And
You're an advanced writer, you should get a website.
I should get a website. Yeah, I could go both ways on that personally. I don't disagree.
Yeah.
If only I do a Coffee Wolf, I can ask to like help me build one. Or
Well, I just got suckered into help someone set up an art thing. You're gonna have to really bribe me on this one.
Okay, coffee, got it, done.
Way more than coffee at this point.
Okay, a couple pounds of coffee, got it.
Or you can just ask someone else who knows how to do
Like,
it.
Oh,
that
yeah,
small cat guy. Over there.
But yeah, it's I am interested in doing a website. It's not something that's super high on my priority list. Like writing, getting my novel done is a little bit higher for me. But it's also one of those things where having those sorts of sites and those resources can be helpful. nice knowing everything's collected in one place. If someone wants to see your other work, they don't have to find some random book that you're in to try to piece it all together.
Yeah, and I think for me, just coming from like my Sofori roots, my fan base was built there. I I get people commission me from there and things like that. So it's just like my furry website pages suit me well enough at this time. But getting a website is definitely not bad advice, and it's advice I've seen multiple times. That's why my mainstream pen name has a website.
It's probably the same advice they told you at ROAR, didn't they? They told us the year I went.
They did say that.
Yeah, we
they
should get a
did.
website.
Yeah.
They did.
We all went to a different writing workshop. I went the year he went the year after I went. That is one of the pieces of advice they told. But novels. So how about you talk about transitioning to novels and your experience with that? Because I think that's an advanced topic.
Yeah. Novels are fun.
Yeah.
They're intimidating as crap.
Oh, no, they're fun.
Well, for me, short stories are something I can knock out a short story in a week if I try hard enough. Less than that if I'm doing RAR. And editing that, I can get feedback pretty quick. I can edit something in about another week, especially giving it enough time sitting there. If I'm actively trying, 2 months is more than enough time to get a story really well polished. A novel, on the other hand, I mean, it took me trying to nano my novel, the last 30,000 words of it. And as I got close to the end, I'm noticing bits that I'm like, oh, by having this end here, I see things I want to change from the past and change in edits and in edits. And personally, this is a difficulty I had and still have, is the prospect of these edits, for me, are a challenge. I see them lining up. I already have ideas of where my issues are, the things I need to work on for this novel. And it's like I start working on it and I'm like, this is a task. It is definitely, it's a very different experience, to say the least. And the fact that I'm still chasing anthologies on the regular, it makes it that much harder for me to focus on my novel. Because, again, anthologies are less scary to me, because a short story, I can do a 10,000 word short story and get detailed feedback and edit the heck out of that pretty well. A novel, it's 40,000, 50,000 words, which is still technically short for a novel, is still intimidating.
It's even more than that.
Well, mine currently is about 40 to 50,000. I'm on the low end of the word count. My edits will add to that, but.
How about you?
So before I started truck driving and kind of derailed my basically whole system of writing that I had going, my goal was to do 3 novel drafts a year, and I was on track to do that. I was doing a minimum of 2,000 words per day, and a lot of days I could get higher than that, but that was writing full-time. I wrote 7 hours a day. I would go into the smoke shop, sit down, set up my laptop, smoke my pipes, work on words, work on research, outlining whatever I was doing, but I would put 2,000 words at least on a page per day. So it's doable. Novels are doable. Like the three drafts in a year, I was well on track to do that. The difference between that and short stories is kind of like what TJ said, because if you knock out 2,000 words, in some cases you've got a short story. So the whole way you approach them is completely different, because you got to look at the pacing. With novels, it's going to be longer and drawn out. Your arc is going to be a little more smooth, whereas a short story, you've got to get everything in your word count. So it's going to be more steep, I would say.
Gentleman behind you actually has a question.
So regarding short stories, what would be a good way to pick topics for that? Or going about keeping it short?
The way I approach it, a short story, well, it depends. If you're writing for an anthology, you're going to usually have a hard deadline, a hard deadline and a hard word count. So you have to kind of scope your ideas and what you're trying to do for that, and that's something that you feel I felt out over the years of how writing. And as you get better, I think you'll have a better idea. This is the concept I want to run. It's going to take this many words, roughly. Now, there are times where things grow, and this also depends whether you're a pantser or an outliner, because pantsing, you're just going to run with some concepts, and you're going to have less idea of what that final length will be, probably. Again, that may depend on how you work, but I know when I'm pantsing something, it's going to be whatever I don't have as much control, and then sometimes I'm like, oh crap, I've got to cut stuff, or I want to add a little. For outlining, if you do that approach, you'll know once you have an outline, and once you've done it a couple times, okay, this much outline generally translates to this much words, roughly. But length is, when you're not writing for a specific goal, I mean, length is something you don't really need to worry about as much. And sometimes you're going to come with an idea which it's really good, and it's either too long or you want to shorten it up. And that's fine. Don't be afraid to do that either way.
In that regard, it really comes down to what's important for your story. Everything in your story should be moving the plot, should be advancing the plot, should be doing something to get your story from the beginning to the end. If it's not doing something like that, it sounds like those are words you can cut right there. If every scene, every sentence should be doing something to help build on your story, be it the world, the characters, the plot, as I said. And that's one way I could definitely recommend to keep it short. It's by focusing on just the core of the story and not worrying about extra characters and how they grow or develop terribly much beyond your main. Granted, sometimes your main characters are 3 people, and seeing how they change in their relationship is going to be important. It all depends on what you're writing and why you're writing it.
Jumping off that, that's absolutely correct. Any sentence you write should either develop the world, develop the character, or advance the plot. Preferably all 3 of them, at least 2 of them. So that's one way you can keep your stories concise, is to make sure that what you're writing is doing that.
Yes. Sometimes I think sometimes we focus a little too much sometimes on, if you focus a little too close on that, I would argue sometimes your work is going to come out a little choppy, and you might need to add some words in editing where things happen very, very quickly. You don't always give the concept enough time to breathe. That's sometimes I think it's good to have some breathing room on something, but this is also something, length will constrict you on that, especially if you're writing for a 4,000 word short story. You don't have a lot of time to let the concept or your characters breathe on the page.
Or 1,000 word flash fiction.
Yeah, 1,000 word flash fiction. There isn't time for that. Now, if you're writing an epic novel and there's some time to have, you may not drive, still want to try to drive stuff, but maybe not the major points, some of your background plot points in a novel. There are some scenes where things will develop, and it may not be as terse or as full of tension as you'd have in a short story, because it's good to have a little breathing room, I think. This is a personal opinion of mine, and this comes from watching a lot of movies. If you watch older movies, they give things more time to develop, sometimes to the point where it looks silly, but then if you watch certain new movies, it's like, oh, we had prom, bangs, sci-fi, or CG, oh, now it's over. I'm like, well, I never had a chance to really think about it or feel it.
It was a question for him. I know when you mentioned you were on track to write 3 novels a year, and I know novels vary in length, and so that's to help give concept for people who don't know what length you were trying to go for. Because so many people are like, Mom, I've just been working on this one novel for like last 18 months. I feel like I'm not doing anything. About how long were those novels in words per se? Okay,
so it's going to depend on genre, what your target is, but all 3 of those novels were 50,000 words plus. None of them Well, okay, so the sci-fi probably would have ended up about 110. But the other two were going to be right around 60,000 words.
Oh, yeah, because I have, like, when I write a novel, it's like 150, 200,000 words, and it's like, you know, it gives, like, context where, like, somebody's like, I feel like I'm not, when you say, like, somebody says 3 novels, and people don't realize novels vary greatly in length, and it helps to give people an idea of, like, you're still doing fine, and I think that what helps is, like, you hear somebody like, oh, I pump out 3 novels, you know, in 18 months, and somebody's like, I just wrote 1, and they could be the same length between the 3, you know, the 3 and the 1, and, you know, they may feel discouraged. That's why it's always good context to, you know, to give.
Right. So we were talking about the SFWA before
Yeah.
the panel. They have guidelines for what the length of what is, and they generally say that 50,000 plus is novel, or is it 60,000 now?
I think it's 50, last I looked.
Okay, yeah, so 50,000 plus is novel, and below that is novella.
Now, there is also marketability issues. A 60,000 word novel is much more difficult to sell to a press, depending on the genre. There's something called light adult novels, which is a thing the Japanese do. I'm not familiar as much with them, but I know one of the presses is very interested in that. Those are going to be shorter. When you're writing hard science fiction, and even in high fantasy, your lengths tend to go up. There's a lot more words dedicated to world building. I think 150,000 is when, for mainstream press, it's really tough to go beyond that.
Yeah.
Depending also on the genre, but even for science fiction and fantasy, they get a lot more leery about taking that from a new author they don't know. They once you've established yourself, if you're writing in the mainstream, then you have more flexibility, I think, in what your lengths are, and stuff like that. So, gentlemen, agree.
Just kind of going off of like the novel stuff, I know at least I think all 3 of you have mentioned some stuff about with novels, and with the different genres and stuff. Also keeping in mind, you know, like the sci-fi, I guess, kind of tends to run a little bit longer because you're doing all that world building. Can you maybe talk a little bit about, for each of you, you know, if you did have the novel in the works and your plans, what was like your end goal with, like maybe like traditionally publishing or self-publishing or anything like that? What kind of genre you were really maybe drawn to, and like, I guess, what your end goal was in terms of like vague word count? I mean, not really looking for anything exact, but maybe just, you know, how long roughly you were thinking of, you know, kind of ending at.
So when I started writing my novel, I have an idea. This is over 10,000 words, and I'm barely 5 days into a 7-day event. I think it was 3 days, maybe even 2, into this, my short story that's supposed to be about 10,000 words. I'm like, this is not 10,000 words. Okay, let's see where this goes. So for me, it was one of those, I was just writing this story that I knew I wanted to tell for a long time. And I sat down, started going through it, and my personal goals with it was, after I workshopped it and found out that, no, this is a valid story idea, this is actually something that could be really interesting, my goal was to get it up to snuff, get it edited by some friends of mine who are also traditionally published writers. And after getting their stamp of approval on it, I was hoping to send it to Soulful twice, then for Planet, and then maybe we'll see where we go from there, if. My current word count goal, I really don't have one necessarily. I have a friend who says with the genre I'm working on and my current word count's too short, and using that I'm going to find a way to try to expand on it, because they're writing more for mainstream and they understand that marketability and everything like that a lot better. They're also an agented writer and I'm not. So that's where I'm going with mine.
So I have this novel, I read a short story in 2011, and I had this short story and I submitted it and it got rejected. But before I even came back, I'm going to write a sequel to this because I really like this. And this was, so I should step back. I was going to write this one novel, Novel A, we'll call it. And Novel A, I wrote a couple scenes. I'm like, I don't understand this world. So I'm going to write this short story, which is short story A, short story B, we'll say. And I submitted that, and that didn't work. Well, that was the original character of the novel A. So I created short story C, which was the other one, and they're like, short story C is like, oh, I like, these are new characters, I really, in the same world, and I really like this. Was gonna write this other short story, we'll call it C prime or C2. And so, then I was like, well, this got rejected, and I really I'm gonna write, just called, it's gonna become novel C, novella C, sorry, it was gonna be a novella. So I glued this short story with this other part, and this is around 2000, this started in 2010, 2011, my 2012, and then eventually, I did actually, I had this half-finished novella, and so I did Camp NaNoWriMo about probably 4 years ago now, and I actually finished it. Now, I never had a real outline for this, so I went back and started editing, and I realized, oh my god, this is an absolute disaster and I really like the characters in the world, but there was never a real structured plan, and so I had to go back and do a lot of heavy lifting. It was originally 18 chapters, it is 16 chapters. My goal has been, and then I started, I had about 60,000 words, maybe it'll be 80, it would be easier to sell if it was 80, and it's past 80, it's 88,000, and I like to get it up to 90, because I do have one or two things. But I had to do a lot of refinement on this to get to this point, and I had to do a lot of rewriting, because I wrote parts of it really fast, and parts of it were really old, and I had to also give the villains and the antagonists actual, why are you doing these things? And that was things that, if I had created an outline, I would have had way more idea. And I'm going to try to write a sequel, which is not going to be pants this way, because I refuse to ever write a book this way
It's
again.
terrible.
No, do what works for you. It obviously
It's
doesn't work for
taken
Night
way
Eyes.
too long.
It doesn't work
Way
for
too
Night
long.
Eyes. If pantsing works for you, though,
If
do
you
that.
if you can pants a novel and it's coherent and it's good, do it.
Well,
Absolutely.
I can pants a novel. It's not coherent. Obviously, it is coherent now because I have spent a long time cussing at it, gone off and refused to work on it and other things, gone back, and had enough perseverance to make it coherent. But that was not the way I would suggest writing the novel and taking that long. That's how I ended up with the goal of really, I'm going to keep changing, and it kind of evolved into this. Now I'm like, wow, I actually really like this. I think this is useful. People will maybe want to read it. But it was not like the most brilliant, I had this great idea, I wrote it all down and just started writing and it was worked out. No. For me, it was the hard way to write a novel.
All right, real quick before I mention my novels, is everyone familiar with the difference between a pantser and an outliner?
All right, I see one that no, so we'll go with that.
Okay.
So we're going to assume no. Okay.
There were some no's? Okay. So a pantser, it comes from, flying by the seat of your pants, the expression. You don't make a detailed outline, you just sit down, you start writing a story, by the seat of your pants. Where an outliner will actually make a structured outline that they follow to fill in all of the blanks. And
Some outliners do that, and then they end up writing something completely different afterwards.
that's very true. And I'm actually in that in-between category, even when it comes to the novels, because I'll make the outline and then I'll just kind of pants everything in between it.
I remember actually having an outline that was really high-level points. It's like, okay, cool, I'm going to start from here. Pants to the next high-level point, pants to the next
Yeah.
high-level point, pants to the next high-level
Yeah, and that's how I write my novels, and it's really, for me, it's a really fun way to do it. But I think I'm the odd man out on this group in that I actually set out to write the novels that I started writing. Intended them to be novels from the get-go, so I did. I built the outlines and
Weirdo.
started. Yeah, I know, right?
Organized, so organized.
And I've already answered the word count question. The goals were 60, 60, 110. There was a hand in the back.
Is there another question? Do you have a question?
Oh, back behind him. You had your
Do you have
hand
a
up?
question? Okay, so just for clarification, the question was, for our personal preference, do we prefer to write digitally or handwrite? I do both. Normally what I'll do, especially if I'm going for publication, I'll type up something, preferably in Word, because the publisher will like you. And usually that is actually usually in the submission requirements, they want a .doc or docx.
I'm going to argue with you about that.
That's what I said usually argue.
But I like the last story I actually just submitted. I handwrote my outline. And actually, no, I typed up my outline. I handwrote my story, and I transcribed that story. And that transcription for me just becomes an editing pass. This way, it's another way for me. I get my general idea down. It's almost like a different version of an outline for me. It's just I'm just going a word for word outline that sometimes I end up deviating from anyways as I'm transcribing it. Because I thought of a better way to make this transition. I thought of a way to keep this scene the core of the scene the same, but I know a way I'm going to modify it now and make subtle changes to where it flows a little bit better for the plot.
I just write everything online. I will take paper notes though, sometimes. And so I'm prone to doing like sketching out ideas with pencil, but I type, the stories themselves I type. With the whole Word thing, I agree, but if you can't afford Word, because the only reason I argue with this is because Word costs money.
Word does cost money,
and
yes.
Some of you may not have the money, or you need to save that money for something else. Write with what you have, or there are people who like really strip down writing to utilities because it just cuts out all the distraction. If they just have a blank page, there's a couple like that. Or they use Scrivener, which I've used. Ideally, you want to at least run it through Word if you can, so if you submit something, you know it's going to look right in Word. OpenOffice is usually pretty good, but I've had horror stories. I had an entire story that I got corrupted during editing, and I had to fight with it, and it was a really awful experience. I'm not sure I think it was Word, but those things can happen. So don't be afraid if you don't have Word that you can't write at all. Preferably, you do want to put it in Word, though. But again, I don't want it to be a barrier to entry to keep people from writing.
And I'm all digital because I can't even read my own handwriting.
That's why it's mine. As I said, mine's just basically it's a more precise outline because chicken scratch.
I think you had a follow-up question. She had a follow-up question. Did you?
Oh no, just your
Okay.
comment about Word. I find that writing in LaTeX and compiling it to PDF is worked very well for me, and it's free.
Which one?
LaTeX? LaTeX?
Oh, latex?
I'm sorry about the pronunciation.
No,
it's fine.
Yeah, I was surprised to hear that you submit in LaTeX because previous submissions I've made, the publisher demanded it in PDF. They
Well-
did not want.
Were you publishing to furry houses or mainstream houses?
Mainstream, but not here, in the States. Not
Okay, I'll be completely honest. I don't have much experience in mainstream markets. All of my writing has been exclusively for furry or tangentially furry publications. The one that was not exclusively a furry publication still wanted a Shun's manuscript format in a Word document. And that was, again, just my experience.
The one thing with Shun's, I don't agree with the way he needs to change that. There's an updated version, the underline.
Yeah.
So it's generally, instead of, for italics, you would underline it. Most people will tell you now that you don't have to do it. You can actually use italics if you're using Word. And people do like Word because it's much easier to add comments than other things. Having gone through a whole book and having to fix all the underlined italics and make them actually italics for publishing, I would prefer if people had not completely done what Shun suggested. But that is the one, if you Google it, that's the document that comes up and it says you should underline your italics and not make them italics.
I think Spines and Replace is fairly simple for that, though.
It's kind of, I don't know, you have to use something, it's a little more advanced. I have to look that one.
It's just find and replace, just shift underscore, then shift.
You can search for italics and Word.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can search.
So
find that
apparently,
one.
the Coffee Wolf needs to go onto the tech panel.
Look, I was really worried. In the end, I was very slammed. I didn't think of Google in that one, okay?
No, that's fair. I'm just teasing.
I had to do lots of fixing quotes and between multiple writers' styles and whatever they had their words.
Yeah, the smart quotes and the non-smart quotes and all that.
Yeah. And dashes. And I had to fix dashes too.
Yes, because some do double dash and some actually use the M dash and yeah.
So anyway,
Just wanted to add to some of that formatting stuff. I've done a lot of editing work too, and especially Word's really nice because it does takes the double dash and usually auto corrects the M dash most of the time. But Google Docs too is another really good solution that comes out pretty close to Word. And I've had friends send me stuff in there that you just copy it right over to Word, and it's usually very close. So that's another good option too.
Oh yeah, no, I've done Google Docs and then did the doc and only had a couple more changes that the doc suggested.
Yeah, it's usually pretty close.
I have a question about editing. So, for me personally, I wrote a few novel manuscripts a couple of years ago, and I'm retooling them and editing them, and I'm basically just going through and reading through them all again, writing down edits I want to change story-wise, and grammatically making them on a second pass to really end up reading my own books 3 times, which takes a long time. So I was just wondering, from your guys' experience, how do you actually do, mechanically, these novel edits or these short story edits? Do you reread the whole thing, or do you have ideas of where you want to go back into your stories and change things that way?
Okay, so I'll say in regards to editing novels, you're done with your novel when you're sick of looking at it.
Okay, yeah, so I must be doing it right.
No, you are going to read your own novel several times, and after you give it to an editor and they do all of their work, you're going to have to read it again and make all those changes. So there is just going to be a lot of that. That's just part of it.
for the thing I've worked on it by chapter because I have 16 chapters and they're equivalent of a short story. And I will read through some of them I've read multiple times, and then I'm going to have to go back and make another pass. I expect to try to do at least another. I have some edits. Little things I need to fix. I have a small addition I want to make. So I'm probably going to end up reading the whole thing. Oh God, I mean,
Yeah.
a lot. It's going to be go over each chapter, make edits, and then make more edits. And now I'm I want to get down to polishing edits. I'd like to read the whole thing out loud, and that's a good way I find to fix stuff. There are short stories. I'm running a Patreon as a experiment, and the short story I just put on there, which I couldn't find anybody who could read it in a short time period, because it's something I've already beta read before. I read it twice more, one time out loud before I even put it online, and I don't consider that completely finished, even though it's been through 2 beta rounds, because I'm sure I could probably go back and there are things that people have mentioned that I probably should tweak, but I need this one to be done and to move on. But it's a process. I found some really great typos reading out loud on the last one. I'm this is sad. It's kind of sad that, considering how many times I've been through it, that some of these are still here.
I'd like to jump off that real quick. So, reading out loud, I completely agree that is invaluable. However, it can wear you out. You can get tired of that. Text to speech, although not perfect, can be a lifesaver there.
So the way I edit normally, I'll go with the short story, then explain how I'm attempting my novel, because I'm still so into it just early on. Normally the short story, I have my outline or story that I just got my draft 0 completed. From there, normally we'll go through it a second time, and as I'm reading through it, I do make notes. And with the short story, it's easier to do. From there, I'll go through, try to actually apply those notes. Also, depending on the length of the story, I might just, especially in how fresh it is for me, I might just go through and, I want to change this. I may already know the things I want to update now. And as I'm going through my second read, I might just start making those changes right away, especially if they're smaller changes that don't impact the entire arc of the story. By the time I've gone through all those changes, I'll then try to read it out loud, and because I know the words that the order these words are supposed to be in, what the words are supposed to be, I may miss a dropped A. I'll toss in a text-to-speech app, which someone stole before I could say that. And this because the computer is a computer and will read exactly what you put in. It may not sound completely clear, it may not flow 100% right.
Do you use Microsoft Narrator?
I just legit Google. I do not use Microsoft. I do not use SAM. I have a site I usually go to that has been okay for me. But when there's a missing A or an N, it sounds odd, and you catch it right away. At that point, normally that's when I'll send it out for betas and try to get some feedback on the overall story, and then I'll do the same thing. I look at their comments. Normally I don't even look at the text unless there's some sort of inline change. If there is, then I'll see what they're changing, what they're trying to suggest. But usually I look at the comments, compile the comments into a different notepad, seeing person A said blah, 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 blah. How many people line up with this? How many people, do I even like these ideas or suggestions?
Yeah.
I'll dive into those comments, and then even then I might send it to another group after that. I know my Heat 15 story went to 3 different groups before the editor got it, and then the editor gave me like 4 more versions of edits after the fact. So I got really freaking tired of that story.
Yeah.
But for my novel, what I'm attempting right now, by the time I got to the end, I knew that there were already some plot changes I wanted to make. I already knew where those were. I had also done a silly thing and sent the draft 0 first 10 pages to my local writing group. And these are the people who have done the professional thing, including an agented author. And I went through with that and had them read the first 10 pages and had it promptly torn into, which is not bad. I needed it. It has a lot of things to work on. And so I already know I need to change my voice because originally it was in a journal, thank you, format. Basically, I was writing the novel as a journal from the main character's point of view. And I was basically told, no, don't do that. This format, the way I was writing it, didn't work well. So I now know as I'm reading through this, I'm going through taking all of that out. I also make utter changes to like the opening of the novel. I took out the first page or so that I already had, and I'm rewriting that first page from scratch and building on that. As I keep reading, my goal is to try to either just read and make these line edits as I go, maybe make a note for an overall change later on, and then once I get through this, probably read through it again, then send it to my group, and then go from there. Then the cycle repeats.
Yeah, that being said, burnout is an issue, and feel free to put a project down and maybe shift to another one, or go take a walk, get a cup of tea. I recommend that one.
Always
just
want tea.
relax. So
Tea sounds fantastic.
there's absolutely nothing wrong with not burning yourself out.
Thank you.
How do you keep going?
With burnout and how to keep going?
Well, preferably how do you not burn out and keep going?
So not burning out would probably be not overdoing it, and the way I would say that is you want to work consistently and find whatever works with your schedule. You may have different work schedules. If you work 4 days a week, because I know some people do that and they work 3 days off, you're not going to be able to do so much those 4 days, especially if you want to work out or cook dinner, But try to stick to a good schedule. It's good to have goals and deadlines, but you don't want your goals and deadlines to the point where it feels like torture.
Right.
And sometimes you're gonna do that to yourself a little, and then you're gonna need to back off and relax. It's a process of when you do take a break, always coming back. It's not easy, but as you keep writing, you'll get better at it, and you'll hopefully find ways that how you can maybe reward yourself when you complete a project or feel good about that.
Yeah, so I've been in a slump myself. I haven't been doing much writing because I've been working like a dog. But today, for instance, I did 110 words on a story. Now, I have 2 stories I need to work on for Fang 10, to submit to Fang 10 coming up. What I worked on was not Fang 10. What I worked on was a personal project just to ease me back into writing. And that's something I personally do. I'll have multiple projects, and if I feel like I just can't focus on one, I'll try switching to another. And the way it works for me is that usually just keeps me going, usually keeps me in that creative focus, and it keeps me writing.
For me, something that does help is if I'm smart, which I'm never smart, I'll start a project months before the deadline.
Right.
Like going off of
Oh, yeah.
Fang 10, for example. I'm lucky with Fang 10 because I have 2 trunk stories that actually fit the theme. I need to edit a little bit to fit the theme a little bit better, but I can just jump right into the editing portion. If I hadn't done that yet, ideally 2 months before the deadline I start writing. This way, once I finish writing it, I can sit it down, walk away from my project, and get other eyes on it. At that time, I can either start writing my different draft, or just recharge. At that point, I gave people a week to beta this. I'm going to sit back and play video games. Hi, Octopath Channel. Let me go ahead and clear through another story here, or something like that. Just taking a break for me before I start getting these edits. And when I get these edits, I then start compiling them and then jump right into them. And that break in between each cycle, not only does it help you prevent burnout, it also makes it to where you can see your story easier. Because again, I keep citing my Heat 10 story because it was the one that I was almost literally getting nauseous seeing the words in this order because I was staring at them so long. But it's also the story I'm the most proud of. I am so grateful for the editor that I worked with for that story and how hard, not just the editor, but all the writers I worked with, including these 2 people over here. Because I knew how much I worked on it, yes, I did get burnout because I was getting sick of looking at these words. I would make a change to a line, and I'd immediately have to toss in that whole paragraph into a text-to-speech app because I could not listen to it myself. I could not read it myself because I already knew what everything was saying, and my mind was reading ahead, pretending it was already there. So really having that opportunity to take a break, to step away from your project, if you have that freedom to do so, is really what helped me.
By the way, his wasn't like obvious. Like seems very applicable to just like anything in life.
Take a break.
Any artistic thing, drawing,
Yeah.
or even engineering work.
Yeah.
Being a
absolutely
lazy
true.
nerd, I could say the same thing about video games. I've got
Yeah,
burned
yeah.
out from a game for playing it too long.
I have another question that's kind of towards the publishing angle. Now, you guys are mostly furry, like authors. So have you ever tried to come to the decision, like, this isn't lewd or anything, maybe this is enough to be in the mainstream? So have you ever had to go through that decision-making process, and like, what was that like? Like, if something was E for everyone or T for teen, and it could be, maybe get a wider audience that wasn't just the furry demographic.
So to be completely honest, the one story I do have that was not published through a furry house was through Circlet Press. They don't state this, but they are furry adjacent.
Okay.
And they're a queer erotica publishing house. So for me, I'm also being vague, but not going to go anywhere because this is a general panel, but the theme was Beauty and the Beast, and they wanted Beauty and the Beast erotica, and I wrote that.
Yeah.
I still had a human main character, a beast secondary character, and I made it work. Now, whether it's lewd or not, I mean, again, erotica is a really big genre in and of itself. Mm-hmm. You can find that in the mainstream. Just because you don't see it so readily in Barnes and Noble doesn't mean it's not there.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, and
This sounds horrible.
and not all furry stuff has to be erotic.
Mm-hmm.
The anthology I edited, I was technically rated R, but I wanted dystopian fiction, and it was because I was looking for something much more serious, and it was still in the furry genre, but I wanted something like that. My closest to a mainstream story was I submitted to the Werewolves Versus series. They were doing, when they did their ones versus fascism, I had a story which is set in 1944, and it deals with Nazis. It is meant to be kind of historical. It's not furry. It's not the furry trope. It's more on the werewolf trope. But it was definitely something. I didn't have a lot of issues with that, but I haven't really wanted to venture too far out of furry. Partially because I really like it, and for me, I only have so much time in my life outside of work, and I've stuck to one thing. Now, there are some people who that's not going to work for them, and I don't blame people who go mainstream. And there are writers like Ursula Vernon, who she's here, and she's really pushed her stuff outside of the mainstream.
Yes.
And yet she's still here. So,
Yeah. Well, that's kind of the part of the decision-making process, like what is the furry trope? Because like, I mean, so much of the mainstream culture that everybody is into these days, I mean, there are furries everywhere. I mean, that's probably how most of us got into furry in the first place, was because we saw a popular video game like Star Fox for this or this character in this. So that's also kind of like hard to decide what you're shooting for.
I think it's a challenge,
Yeah.
honestly.
At the same,
I don't have a clear answer personally.
I also want to refute a little bit of what was being said there, because in my opinion, zipperbacks are valid as well.
Yes.
The what?
Zipperbacks.
have
Sorry,
to
it's
define that.
yes.
It's jargon, yeah.
It is jargon. I pulled it from Fangs and Fonts. They probably pulled it from someone else. A zipperback is a character that is furry because I say it is. I say this character is a
Yeah.
fox, and that's all I do is say this character is a fox.
It's a human in a zipped up fur skin.
Basically,
Oh, okay.
think of like a mascot outfit or a fursuit. It's,
Oh yeah.
If you look close enough, you can see the zipper on their back.
Yes,
because,
okay, I
yeah.
agree with that. Yeah.
That is used as a derogatory term.
But it doesn't have to. It depends on how it's used and how the person is using
So
it.
you're saying that people also got into it because of mascots, essentially?
No, not necessarily. I'm just saying I like riding foxes, or wolves, or otters, or whatnot. So I just decided I want to write this story with an otter because I like otters. Don't need to like anything more beyond that, and that's just my reason for it.
Yeah.
And sometimes with our mainstream writing group, they've actually asked us, like, why are these even furry characters? And the answer can be because I want them to be.
Oh yeah.
Now, generally, a lot of the publishers want there to be a reason for these characters to be anthropomorphic animals.
Some houses more than others.
Some houses more than others, but I mean, keep that in mind.
Yeah.
Because it's, I mean, you know, we're furry. It's fun. You know, have the enhanced sense of smell and the waggy tails.
Can I break a rule?
Of
Sure.
course.
So I actually do have an answer for your question. And the trade-off there becomes, how much control do you want over your story? Because the difficulty with going into the mainstream is, let's say that you go with someone like Analog. Like you submit a furry story to Analog, as opposed to you submit a furry story to, I'll say Roar 10. The difference there is, one of the benefits of the furry fandom is, let's say that you are a writer who is just beginning your journey as a writer. You have a lot of promise, you have a lot of talent. 2 different editors. An editor for something like an Analog or a mainstream short story publication, they'll take one look at your story and they'll go, that looks great, but you know what, I have these other 40 stories that look awesome and I don't have to do any developmental editing on them. They're mostly correct, and they conform to this thing that Analog embodies. So reject it. Whereas Aurora, which is a non-genre specific publication, may go, you know, this story has a really nice little heart in it, and it has some flaws in it, but I see so much promise here that I think it could be worked with. Tentative acceptance, conditional on how well the writer can get these things done. So one of the major things, the decision points in that regard, that you have to decide for yourself is, where are you in your writing journey, and how much do you want to have to conform to the mainstream? Because if you get a publishing contract with, like, let's say you got really fortunate, you have an agent, and you have an opportunity for a publishing contract with Tor, or one of Tor's imprints. Tor is going to have very specific things they're going to expect out of, let's say, a novel. They are going to have marketing research that says, this novel in this genre with these types of devices sell very well. And that your editor may come back and say, sorry, you know that thing that you had here that you really love, sorry, you gotta ditch it. Otherwise, we're not gonna publish your novel. Or they may not be as bald-faced about that, but that's pretty much what it takes. Because remember, traditional publishing has very thin margins. They sell those books. They do all the marketing for you. They stage everything. The other thing too is like, how much are you willing to put your skin in the game for those books? Which is the case anywhere. So just keep that in mind. The difference between mainstream and furry can be how much more opportunity you have.
What can be the difference between mainstream and indie?
And the other thing is like I have not had an experience with Circle. Keep in mind that I do float in some of the other professional circles, so I hear things. Like most of this is secondhand knowledge, so your mileage may vary, you know, your experiences may vary.
Something else,
Like,
if I can.
but, like I don't know how much Circlet did developmental editing with you, for example.
Not much.
So
Something I do know, I've actually heard from someone who did slush for a major house, though I don't know what house, and they won't say, and I'm not going to pry. If they accepted the story, they accepted it as is. They are not expecting to do edits or anything along those lines. That doesn't usually happen with most of my experiences in the fandom.
Right.
Usually, if you're getting accepted, it's on the condition you're willing to work with the editor.
Yeah.
I did have a story that was so perfect it required no edits.
No. No.
Not that story.
No.
If I might also point out, mainstream, I think they are, is you're right, there are marketing things. There are things they won't do. And you have to also kind of be aware of that. And I think, partially why, since I read a more interest in LGBT characters, even in non-adult stories, I've been hesitant to chase after the mainstream because that feels like a harder sell.
Yeah.
And I've had people tell me that's a bad perspective on mine, but I do think that's something to consider depending on what genre you want to do or what you're looking to do. That you may find things like, well, we don't want that, whatever that is. We don't want X. You're interested in X. Well, we're never going to buy it. And sometimes these presses they get all into something for a while and then they look for the next trend. I get a little. Furry doesn't really do a lot of marketing research, and I think sometimes I think that comes out a little more authentic. But then obviously we don't have the reach of the mainstream, so it's a trade-off.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for the answer.
yeah, that's another goal too. Like, how much work are you willing to put in to dedicate to this? Because there are people who will submit to the mainstream who they've had like 60, 70, 100, 120 rejections on the story before it's accepted. So like, how much persistence are you willing to do? Because one difference between furry and mainstream is that because of the sheer scale of volume, you might be waiting for a while in the story.
Yeah, our slush piles, I think the largest I heard of was still under 100. It's mainstream is well above that.
Yeah, I mean they won't always read your whole story. I mean, when I did a book,
Yeah.
there was stuff I knew I wasn't taking, but I read the whole damn thing as a courtesy to the author. There's one I wish I hadn't read the whole damn thing, but I still read them all. Sometimes mainstream press, they have I've read one of these, like the person at the pen, if the pen doesn't stop tapping, if the pen stops tapping, they're interested, but there's a point where they go, nope, like if they can't stop tapping their pen after a point, done.
Yeah.
And they're like, read a page or two, and it's like, so they don't always read the whole thing because they get to a point and they're like, this is not what I want. Next. Because they don't have time. I mean, they just don't.
Yep.
She had.
Oh, I also believe he was holding on one. Did you have a question?
Basically, I was just gonna say like, with the whole zipperback thing, I was just wondering, with your stories, how do you make it matter that I mean,
it
like
depends
with
on the
the
story.
first Star Fox games, it doesn't matter if they were Anthrocon characters. They could have been anything.
Right.
But they were.
It really depends on the story, and it's going to vary from story to story, from genre to genre. I mean, I've had stories where I arbitrarily chose two species because why not? I want this one and that one, and I'm just going with it because I can play up the species and go from there. Others, it matters. When I made an attempt at the Predator Prey anthology, I had a prey species and a predator species dating, and that was a thing, and I made that a thing. Diets was the first story I actually touched food on, and I usually try to avoid that like the plague, because why?
Really?
Oh god, yes.
Yeah.
I hate touching food in the furry world because it's the idea of where does food come from, how does food work, and all of the social implications that come with that. That's a layer of world building I don't want to touch.
So I stupidly have gotten into food in the novel, but see, I also went with an all predator cast. That was a conscious decision where I wasn't going to deal with, and most of these seem to be eating chicken, what is meat. But I didn't want to deal with like deer and that is like, oh, well, we're eating, I have a story where this comes up, where they're different species, the deer and the wolves, and they have a lot of animosity because of things that have happened or not happened. And that's something I'm going to eventually try to work on. This is in a different setting. But yeah, I jumped in on that. Species-wise, it depends on the story. I mean, I try to always use the furry characters and fit things like, again, I always look at these shares. These shares are great. They have tail holes. I mean, you know,
So
so this,
small, but
well, hey, you would work. And there are stories where that's not always where there's mixed worlds where there's humans and furries. I'm thinking Kismet by Watts Martin, that comes up where the main character is a rat, and her spacesuit is not designed for a furry.
Yeah.
And so she can kind of get the tail in there, and it works. And so there are different ways on how you work it. And yeah, sometimes it's especially when you're doing flash fiction, you're just gonna have to roll with it, you know, because you don't have time to really develop this whole complex thing, or even if you work out how these different things work, you just don't have that space for the world building.
Okay, so something you can consider doing, make it a plot point. Say like, I don't know, there's a bomb on a cruise ship or something, and maybe the lone wolf on this cruise ship, because he's you know, it's a prey cruise, but he's dating a bunny and he's the lone wolf on the ship, but his sniffer's so sensitive that he actually detects the bomb. You know, make it a plot point. You can do that and incorporate the animal features in that way. I should probably write that story.
Yeah.
Yeah, those bring me all kinds of places.
Ma'am, you had a question?
Yeah, I just want to ask you, just coming out of the last panel, following up with what you guys are saying now, how do you reach international markets?
Ooh.
Do you even want to?
well, unfortunately, I cannot answer that question because I don't have the closest thing to an international market I might try reaching out to is Tarl Hodge's house, and that's in Canada.
Canada, yeah.
And that's because that is the furry writing community is fairly close knit, especially in the publishing house scene. So there are editors in Canada that will release notes to like the Furry Writers Guild, and put out calls there. Unfortunately, I have not looked into other markets beyond this sphere as far as like North America goes, as far as furry writing.
So I would think, well, I've never tried anything translated, so it's always been in English. But I have some writer friends I have some Canadian writer friends. I have some one writer friend in the United Kingdom. I know you have a good writer friend in Australia.
Australia,
Yeah. So it's, even though it's focused specifically, at least from personally, on the English market, there is kind of collaboration across the pond. And I do think there is some Spanish-speaking furries who have they kind of do things, and I've seen some stories go by that I, of course, can't read it because I don't speak Spanish, but so I think there is some type of community inside the Spanish-speaking market. I don't know if they have their own press.
I don't know either.
I'm not sure about other languages.
I'm just smiling because talking about furries, all African traditional stories are about animals, and all Hindu stories are about animals. And
Right.
So it's like, okay.
Oh yeah. A lot of cultures have animal stories. I mean, I think back to the tanuki in Japan, coyote in North American traditions. That I can name example after example. They're everywhere.
One thing I do, just in general, I've noticed with certain Americans, I know I'll pick up my culture, we sometimes don't look at things from other cultures as much as we should. And I definitely think, I know fiction from Africa in English there is more of it, but we don't always see it. But there's some great novels that have come out of Africa. I'm not as familiar with them, I'm afraid. I know there's the one, Things Fall Apart, which is about colonialism. So there is a whole market there. I don't know if there are some South African furries. I don't know about other areas.
Well, there are a lot of British Commonwealth countries in Africa, they
Right.
English speaking.
Yeah.
And appeal to the problem has been that when Western writers have written, it's always been in the image, yeah? You write in your image, which you are familiar with, of course, because that's natural. And it's been a hard sell to people in Africa, for example, anywhere else too, but the British Commonwealth, since we speak English as well, when you write stories that have characters that are not necessarily always human,
Right.
it's an easier sell because it doesn't have a Western characteristic. It's just, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no,
Yeah, I wholeheartedly agree with that. I mean, that's one of the great things about furry is, it doesn't matter what shade your skin is, doesn't matter what language you speak, you're a talking animal critter. And that's great. I mean, I love it. That's why I love coming to these conventions.
Okay, we're at about 9 minutes left. Just a general time comment. Do you have any other questions?
I guess, where's the best places to find your guys' work? I'm asking you to selfishly plug.
We'll get that after we get
Actually,
Trails.
I'll tie to the last point again, since I kind of do have a connection to the South African market. One of the first writers I published, Dr. Milan, is from South Africa.
Mm-hmm.
And I know he's selling his book, a couple others at the South African Furry Convention. It really comes down to who's willing to take the plunge and start something. I mean, there's a distributor that's in Germany that they sell a lot of furries and stuff that's in German and other languages like French, Spanish, and they'll take the English just because they were ones that wanted to in their area sell the stuff. So I know it really comes down to I have a question about culture. It really comes down to that who wants to work in the community. So I know I would be if we have someone from someone born in Asia that I'm going to start up this this furry publishing or that anything people that are in our market speak English or at least one language they speak is I'll say if they're not from the US they probably speak our language because we're normal. And they say, oh, I wanted to sell some of your books and do that. I'd like, fantastic, I'll send them to you. So that's more of that is who wants to take the plunge. And it's the South African community it started. I know, as I mentioned, Charles in Canada, he started. There's just not a ton of people that really just kind of just gone for it, and that's where we were pushing. The furry community in general, from all over the world, and we're trying to make it more accessible just to everybody who actually wants to work with us. I'm not repeating, but it's kind of the point across it. Who wants to do it?
Okay, so you want to wrap up plugging our own stuff?
sure.
Oh,
Me? No. You can find me on Twitter as Wolf with Coffee. That is easy. And then you can find from there. There's a post. My FA is linked. I've got the website. It's nineeyes-dayspring.com or nineeyes-dayspring.com. It will take you to if you manage to get all those words without the dash, I have that domain also. And then you can find me just as 9 Eyes and FA. And I have a Patreon I'm doing. It's not the most exciting thing, but and I'm thinking how I want to do that because I don't want to be trying to say people should give me lots of money, but I'm also interested in trying to build fan engagement. And people pay for something, they kind of get more into it. And this is just how weird we are as people. If we get something for free, we don't always value it as much as we pay something for it, even if it's the exact same thing.
Right. Oh.
So I'm seeing if that's a great way to build fan engagement. So far, not so much, but we'll see. It's also forced me to do things and write posts and try to say if people are going to pay me money, I should do something and give them something every month. And so I'm trying to do 3 things a month: one writing advice, one sample or something, and then either a piece of flash fiction or something I published previously, or last month I had one I've had sitting, which I finally put somewhere and people can get it. So I'm experimenting.
You can find me in small chunks on Twitter at TJMind, it's MINDE. I have if you're interested in reading some of my work, I have stories in Fang 7 through 9, hopefully in 10, we'll see.
Oh yeah, I should mention I have books.
Yeah, there are books here and there. As I mentioned, I have a story I'm super proud of in Heat 15, which also, I don't know if I mentioned that here, won a Leo Literary Award this year. So very good story, I enjoyed that a lot. I have other things in Knotted and a few other things here and there for Planet's booth, primarily.
Okay, thanks. And I can be found on Twitter at Mog_K_Moogle. And I have various publications as well. Fang 6, unfortunately sold out. Distant Signals, again, highly recommend.
Fang 9 sold
Fang
out?
9.
Fang 9, yeah.
6 might still be there.
Yeah, 6 is still there.
I have a story in 6.
I'm not in 6. He's in 6. Buy 6 too.
62 is not out yet.
And
They're tired.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah. Well, all 3 of us are in Distant Signals. I highly recommend that anthology. I like it a lot.
Oh, do we want to also plug the other thing that 2 of us
That's
are
what
on?
I was gonna do.
Okay, do that.
Also, TJ Mind, Jake Drakis, and myself have started a furry literature review podcast, and that's at Up Fur Review. That's a fur pun, F-U-R, on Twitter. And from there, you can find links to our Telegram, Discord, and our podcast. We're on Stitcher, Spreaker, iTunes, YouTube, and we're having a lot of fun with it.
Oh, yeah.
That's okay.
I think with that, we could probably wrap it up a little bit early. Thank you all for showing up and for coming and for the wonderful questions.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.